Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I was unable to give my lecture on September 8th in person. I hope the next few minutes will give you little information about my life of 96 years. My family lived in Berlin for several generations. I was born in Berlin and I grew up in Hamburg until spring of 1934. My grandparents on my mother's side lived in an apartment house that was built in 1865, confiscated by the Nazis and destroyed by bombs during the war. After my grandfather died, my mother moved to Berlin to be with my grandmother. My grandmother's sister, Martha Mendelssohn, married Wilhelm Wertheim, one of the owners of the famous Wertheim department store in Berlin and several other cities. My immediate family often traveled by train from Hamburg and visited my mother's family as well as other family members. I spent a lot of time with my grandaunt, Martha Wertheim. Aunt Martha and her husband Wilhelm lived in a beautiful villa with 45 rooms with extensive gardening. One of the rooms was my room. I often visited my uncle in his large office in the department store and watched from the window Hitler's Kanzlei being built. I saw all the concrete being poured into the cellar that became famous during the last days of Hitler. On January 30th, 1933, Hitler came to power, and this is when my father was kidnapped by the Nazis. My mother was advised by my father's employer, the Duke of Croy, that something had happened to my dad and that he advised us to disappear and not leave any trace of where we were going. My father was in bad shape when he returned home. This is when I decided I wanted to leave Germany, immigrate to the United States. At that time, everybody who was immigrating to the United States became rich overnight. That was the thinking of people who didn't go. I was advised that I needed a profession so that I could support myself in the United States. My father managed to get me into a horticultural college at the age of 14. I graduated with honors 3 years later. In the summer of 1933, my father left for Belgium and France, where he worked several years for the Duke. That is part of history. The Duke had quite a number of forests that by the Treaty of Versailles were given to the Belgium of France. But the regulations stated that the owners of that property would be reimbursed. And my father worked on that for the Duke when he left Germany. When he returned to Berlin, which I never understood, he was arrested and placed into a Sachsenhausen concentration camp. I did rescue my father by going into the concentration camp, which is a harrowing story as is. It took me 18 months to get a visa to go to the United States and get the exit papers from Germany. I was at my grandfather's home when the doorbell rang at about 8 p.m. on November 9th, 1938. It was a crystal night, the famous crystal night. My dad told me as the bell rang, "Get out, please disappear," in a very rough and very strict voice. This was the last time I saw my dad, or the last time I talked to him. The Gestapo arrested him that evening. During this evening, I saw Nazis herding groups of Jewish people down the street. I saw bodies hanging upside down from lampposts. I saw cars driving over people. I saw shops being broken into. I saw a beautiful temple on fire, and other things I do not wish to remember. When I left Germany with all the correct papers, that I was held up at the Dutch-German border. I almost lost my life at this point. The book covers my life in the United States from 1939 to December 7th in Pearl Harbor. During this period, I tried hard to get a visa for my mother. I did not succeed, and both my mother and grandmother was deported to the concentration camp Theresienstadt, and both of them died there. Shortly after Pearl Harbor, I was inducted in the U.S. Army as an enemy alien. On June 7th, 1942, I became an American citizen, and on Friday, 1 week later, the 13th of June, I married Margaret. So she married an American citizen, even though she was German. In 1943, I became an officer in the U.S. Army. I served in New Guinea and the Philippines, and I was very fortunate to having met General MacArthur on several occasions. There are several exciting war stories that the book covers. The last part of my book covers my civilian life from 1946 to 2015. This includes my work as a landscape architect, my partnership with the two architect partners, my activities with the California Horticultural Society, where I was president for 4 years, my service on the board of directors of the American Society of Landscape Architects, my service on the Bear Creek Planning Committee for 27 years, our house in Alpine Meadows, our work nationally and internationally on garden center design, and lectures that I gave both in the United States and Europe, as well as in South Africa and Australia. I did receive many national and international awards. The award was, we liked the very best, was my lifetime season pass for the Alpine Meadow ski lift. We have been happily been married for 74 years. I suggest you read my book. Thank you for listening.